The desert sun hung low over CENTCOM base, baking the long-range shooting range until the sand shimmered like molten glass. Heat mirages twisted the air, making the distant steel targets waver and vanish like ghosts. The thundering echo of a Barrett .50 caliber rifle broke through the stillness, shaking the ground with every shot. "Where the hell is our medic? Get that girl out here now." Chief Jake Morrison's voice carried across the range with the authority of someone used to being obeyed. His tone wasn't angry, more amused, like a man calling out a punchline before the joke landed. He was a broad-shouldered Navy SEAL, his tan uniform darkened with sweat, his ball cap pulled low over a face lined by years of deployments. Around him, his sniper team lounged in the shade of a canopy, laughing at their leader's antics. The Barrett lay silent on its bipod, gleaming in the light. Its long barrel and monstrous muzzle brake made every other weapon on the range look like toys. Jake gave it a casual pat, as if it were a faithful dog waiting for its next command. "I need someone to clean my rifle," he called out. "And I bet our little battlefield nurse has plenty of free time." The team roared with laughter, their voices carrying downrange. A couple of them slapped each other on the shoulder, enjoying the show. The teasing wasn't new. To Jake and his men, medics were useful but not warriors. They patched bullet holes, carried stretchers, and passed out painkillers. They weren't the ones pulling triggers. A figure emerged from the field medical station, her shadow stretching long across the sand. Harper McKenna walked with steady, unhurried steps, a compact trauma kit in her hands. She wore the same fatigues as everyone else, but her presence stood out for its quiet restraint. Her auburn hair was pulled back tightly, her face calm and unreadable. She stopped a few feet from the group, eyes falling on the Barrett. There was no awe, no hesitation, just a gaze that lingered a second too long, as if she knew the weapon more intimately than her role as just a medic should allow. Jake caught the look immediately. His smirk widened. "What's wrong, Doc? Admiring a real warrior's weapon? This beauty can reach out and touch someone at 2,000 meters. Not like those pea shooters you medics carry for show." The others chuckled again, nodding in agreement. Dust swirled in the wind, and the heat seemed to thicken around them. Harper said nothing. She set her trauma kit down, adjusted the strap on her wrist, and began checking her gear with a kind of methodical precision: tourniquets, position high, airway tools neatly aligned, fluids organized according to the march protocol. Her movements were smooth, practiced. But her eyes, almost against her will, drifted back to the Barrett. One of the SEALs noticed. "Careful, Chief. I think the doc's got a crush." Jake barked a laugh. "Maybe so. But this thing isn't for sightseeing, document. The recoil alone would knock you flat. Stick to bandages." From the tower overlooking the range, Master Sergeant Rodriguez descended with a watchful eye. He was older than the others, a career soldier who had seen his share of hot zones. He studied Harper for a moment, something flickering across his face. Recognition, maybe. Or concern. "Chief," Rodriguez said evenly, "maybe you should." Jake cut him off with a wave. "Don't start, Rod. I'm just giving the doc some education. Respect to what medics do, sure, but this is a warrior's tool. Takes years to master. Not something you just pick up." The words hung in the air like a dare. "I'll shoot it." Harper's voice was quiet, but it sliced through the laughter like a blade. For a moment, even the desert seemed to fall silent. The distant whump of helicopters faded, leaving only the soft whistle of wind across the range. Every eye turned to the medic, now standing with her arms folded loosely across her chest. Jake blinked. Then the grin returned, wider this time. "You want to shoot the Barrett? Oh, this is rich. Sure, document tell you what. $500. Says you can't even hit paper at 800 meters. I'll even give you 3 tries." The team erupted again, enjoying the spectacle. Money exchanged hands as side bets started. This was entertainment, watching the base medic humiliate herself trying to handle a rifle that weighed nearly 30 pounds and kicked like a mule. Harper adjusted the wrap on her wrist, a subtle band of advanced medical tech designed for chronic nerve injuries. Her watch caught the sunlight, its scratched surface hiding something curious: coordinates etched into the band, a location far from here in the Hindu Kush Mountains. She looked Jake straight in the eye. Counteroffer. 3 shots. 800. 1,000. Then 1,200. I hit all 3. You apologize to every medic on this base for your disrespect. The smirks faltered. A couple of the SEALs exchanged glances, as if wondering whether they'd misheard. Rodriguez's eyes narrowed, studying Harper carefully. Jake's laugh was loud, forced. You're serious? Doc, you have any idea how hard those shots are? Wind at 1,200 alone will throw you feet off target. Harper cut him off. More if density altitude is high. Less if there's a tailwind. Right-hand twist rifling makes the bullet drift right. Past 1,000. Coriolis has to be factored depending on latitude. The silence that followed was very different from before. No one laughed. A couple of the SEALs shifted uneasily, their earlier confidence shaken by the medic's effortless technical breakdown. Jake's smile stiffened. Wikipedia knowledge doesn't mean you can shoot, document. But fine. You want to embarrass yourself? Be my guest. Harper stepped closer to the Barrett. She didn't rush. Instead, she walked around it, checking the bipod, the scope, even running her hand along the barrel to feel for heat distortion. Each motion was practiced, almost ritualistic, as if she were reacquainting herself with an old friend. Magazine? She asked simply. Jake handed her one with a mocking flourish. API rounds. Try not to hurt yourself. Harper loaded the magazine with smooth precision, brass checking each round before settling behind the weapon. Her body seemed to change the moment she touched the rifle. The tension in her shoulders melted away, her breathing slowed, and her movements took on a fluidity that belonged to someone who had done this many times before. Rodriguez's jaw tightened. He knew what he was seeing. The other SEALs leaned in, suddenly less certain. The Barrett sat ready, its dark steel glinting under the brutal sun. The range officer's voice crackled over the loudspeaker. Shooter ready. Target at 800 meters, center steel. Harper's cheek rested against the stock. She exhaled slowly, her finger brushing the trigger with the kind of care usually reserved for delicate instruments. The entire firing line held its breath. The challenge had been set. The desert, the Barrett, the medic, and the chief, who doubted her everything, now hinged on the pull of a trigger. The firing line was so quiet that even the desert wind seemed to hesitate. All eyes were fixed on Harper McKenna, the medic who had dared to pick up the Barrett .50 caliber rifle. To the SEALs watching, it was like seeing a nurse walk into the cockpit of a fighter jet and calmly strap herself in. Harper didn't notice the stares. She had sunk into her shooting position as if gravity had pulled her into place. Her body aligned perfectly behind the massive weapon, her hands and elbows forming a natural triangle of stability. The Barrett was no longer just an oversized gun, it was a system, and she was part of it. She adjusted the cheek rest, her face calm and her movements smooth. Her breathing slowed, chest rising and falling with a rhythm that matched the faint ripple of heat on the desert floor. The world around her narrowed, every distraction fading until only the scope and the target existed. Shooter ready. 800 meters. Fire when ready, the range officer announced. Harper exhaled, holding the pause between breaths. Her finger pressed the trigger, not yanked, not jerked, but squeezed with a surgeon's control. The Barrett thundered. The recoil rocked through her shoulder, but she absorbed it, riding the shockwave instead of fighting it. Dust kicked up around her, and the echo rolled across the range like distant artillery. The spotter's voice cut through the ringing silence. Impact center hit. 800 meters. A murmur rippled across the crowd of onlookers. The steel plate downrange swung wildly, a perfect center strike. Jake Morrison's smirk faltered, though he forced a laugh. Lucky shot. Let's see you repeat it at 1,000. Harper didn't answer. She worked the bolt with smooth efficiency, the spent casing clattering onto the sand beside her. She chambered another round, her eyes never leaving the distant horizon. Target at 1,000 meters. Shooter, stand by, the range officer called out. The wind had picked up, fluttering the range flags with subtle differences at varying distances. Harper studied the mirage through the scope, reading the invisible currents the way a sailor reads the sea. Her fingers adjusted the elevation turret, then the windage knob, each click deliberate. She settled again. Inhale. Exhale. Pause. The Barrett spoke, its voice deeper this time, rolling like thunder across the open desert. The spotter leaned into his scope. His voice carried disbelief. Impact. 1,000 meters. 2 inches, right of center. This time, there was no laughter. No mocking comments. The SEALs exchanged glances, their faces tightening. One of them slowly pulled out his phone and began recording. Rodriguez, standing a few feet away, simply nodded once, as if confirming something he had already suspected. Jake's grin was gone, replaced by an edge of irritation. Anyone can get lucky twice, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. He folded his arms, glaring at Harper as if daring her to miss. 1200s where the amateurs get exposed. Past the transonic zone, bullet destabilizes. Wind doubles. You can't fake that. Harper adjusted her scope again, not even looking at him. 1200 is where patience matters. Wait for the wind to settle. Trust your data. Trust your position. Jake opened his mouth to retort, but the calm authority in her voice silenced him. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, weathered notebook. Its pages were filled with handwritten notes, ballistic tables, and range cards. She flipped to a page already smudged with sweat and graphite, then glanced at the flags again. Target at 1,200 meters, the range officer announced, his tone carrying more weight now. Everyone understood this was the shot that would settle everything. The range had grown crowded. Soldiers, techs, and instructors had gathered quietly, drawn by the spectacle of a combat medic challenging a SEAL chief with his own weapon. Harper lowered herself behind the Barrett one final time. She became perfectly still, her breathing shallow, every muscle relaxed. Her world shrank again, narrowing to the crosshairs, the mirage, the subtle sway of the distant steel target. Rodriguez checked his kestrel meter. Density altitude 3,200 feet. Wind gusting 8 to 12 from southwest. Half value at 800. Full value at target. Harper nodded, adjusting for drop and drift. Her lips moved slightly, whispering calculations to herself. She waited, patient, eyes locked on the target. The wind gusted, died, gusted again. She waited longer. Then she squeezed. The Barrett roared louder than before, the concussion washing over the crowd. The round arced across the desert, its trace barely visible against the haze. 2 full seconds passed, stretching into eternity. Impact. The spotter's voice caught, then rose with astonishment. Center hit. 1,200 meters. The range exploded with noise. Gasps, shouts, even cheers. The medic had done it 3 shots, 3 hits, each one more difficult than the last. Harper stayed behind the rifle, eyes still on the target. She followed through perfectly, watching the steel plate sway. Only then did she pull back, safing the weapon with calm, practiced movements. Jake stood frozen, mouth slightly open, his confidence shattered. The other SEALs looked between him and Harper with growing disbelief. They had just witnessed something they couldn't explain away as luck. Harper rose slowly, brushing dust from her uniform. She looked at Jake, her eyes steady. I told you. 3 shots. Now you owe every medic on this base an apology. Jake's face twisted, caught between anger and humiliation. He started to speak, but Harper cut him off. You want to know why I can make those shots, Chief Morrison? Her voice was calm, but carried the weight of memory. Because 4 years ago, I wasn't just a medic. I was Sergeant First Class Harper McKenna, 2nd Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment. Designated marksman. 47 confirmed kills. Longest recorded shot 1,620 meters, with this exact platform. The crowd went silent. But that's not why I can do it. Her voice softened, her gaze distant. I can do it because 3 years ago, my spotter, Marcus Webb, took a round through the chest at 1,400 meters. I had to make a choice, take the shot, or try to save him. I made the shot, eliminated the target. Then I tried to save Marcus. But I wasn't a medic then. I didn't know how to stop the bleeding. I didn't know what to do. He died in 4 minutes while I pressed on the wrong artery. Her hand brushed the Barrett's barrel, almost gently. So I stopped being a sniper. I became a medic. Because saving lives was more important than taking them. But the rifle doesn't forget. Neither do I. The words hung in the air like smoke, heavy and unshakable. No one moved. Then, from the command tower, the radio crackled to life with an urgency that cut through the silence. All stations, all stations. This is control. Real-world casualty. Patrol has taken sniper fire. 1 urgent surgical, 1 priority. Sniper still active. Range estimated 1,300 meters. Medevac cannot approach until threat neutralized. How copy? The laughter, the bets, the rivalry, all of it evaporated in an instant. This was no longer a game. The radio traffic kept coming in sharp bursts. No one on the range moved at first. Then everything snapped into motion. Targets were cleared. Weapons were safed. People ran. Harper slung her kit and jogged after Rodriguez toward the Tactical Operations Center. Jake fell in behind them, jaw set, the easy swagger gone. Inside the TOC, the air was cold and loud. Maps glowed on screens. Feeds from drones stuttered over the valley to the west. A medic on another channel was shouting for more compresses. Someone else was calling elevation and bearings that did not match the grid squares on the wall. Colonel Hayes stood at the center table, with a headset crooked against his ear. He did not look surprised to see Harper and Jake, only relieved that he could stop explaining the same thing twice. Patrol 3 took 2 hits 20 minutes ago, he said, keeping it short. They are pinned in a wadi. Shooter has height and clean arcs. Our medevac is holding outside the envelope. We have fast movers in 20. The urgent surgical will not last that long. Hayes looked at Harper. I cannot order you to pick up a rifle. You do not need to, Harper said. Jake stepped in. Sir, my team can move. We get close, we flank, we. The only 50 on base is yours, and it is zeroed, Hayes said. His tone stayed even. The distance from our nearest covered approach to the suspected position is 1,300 and change. Your M4S will not reach clean. Your designated marksman is down. We are out of time. Harper turned to Jake. I need a spotter who knows how to call wind on this platform. Ruiz is qualified. I want him on glass. Jake took that hit and swallowed it. Then use him. I run security and medevac. I can do that. Good, Harper said. Sir, I'll need match ammo, not incendiary. I want the last hour of temperature and pressure for thermal drift. Get me a driver who won't talk, 2 additional rifles for Overwatch, and a surgical kit staged on the bird. I want whole blood on board and TXA drawn. If the urgent surgical is femoral, we are on minutes. Make it happen, Hayes said. The room grabbed the orders and scattered. Rodriguez moved with Harper through a fast checklist. Battery status. Laser rangefinder. Spare bolt. Torque on the mount. She popped the magazine well, checked the feed ramp, then pulled her notebook again. Her handwriting was tight and fast. She rewrote the dope for a 750 grain at likely density altitude, then circled the wind values that would change most across the canyon. She did not make speeches. She did not look around for permission. She treated the rifle like another piece of medical gear. Ruiz met them at the truck with a spotting scope and a kestrel hanging off a lanyard. He looked at Harper once and said, "Copy your lead." They rolled. The base fell behind in heat shimmer and dust. The truck bounced over hard pan and ruts, suspension groaning, engine working. No one spoke for a minute. It was not silence. It was focus settling into place. Jake broke the quiet with updates from the pinned patrol. 1 priority, shoulder through and through. Breathing is tight but present. 1 urgent surgical, high thigh, bright red. Tourniquet is on. They say the bleed creeps past it. Harper keyed her, Mike Patrol 3. This is McKenna. If you have hemostatic gauze, pack it deep above the tourniquet toward the pelvis. Keep pressure up and back, not straight down. If you have a second TQ, place it higher. Copy, a strained voice answered. We're working it. Harper looked at her watch. She did not see time. She saw how much blood was left for that heart to push before it quit. Ruiz watched the horizon through the windshield and pointed. Ridge line there. Shooter likely on the east-facing shelf. Wind is dirty in that cut. Bring us right of that dry creek bed, Harper told the driver. Stop short of the lip. I want dirt, not skyline. They slid behind a low rise with just enough cover to build a position. Dust hung in the air and then drifted off. Jake's team fanned out, quiet hand signals, clean sectors. 2 rifles took a rooftop backstop on a mud brick ruin to guard their flank. Jake stayed on the radio and on the move, pushing updates toward the bird and back down to the wadi. Harper climbed out with the Barrett and her pack and moved just below the rise. She built her position like a patient bed. Flat base. Rear support. Load the bipod until there was no bounce left. Small adjustments, then smaller ones. She checked the parallax and set it to the exact distancer I wanted. She did not waste a single motion. Ruiz dropped beside her and unfolded the spotting scope. He ranged the ridge in slices and read numbers out like he was measuring pulse. 1342 to the notch. 1338 to the darker rock. 1346 to the shadowed pocket. Flags at our line show 8 to 12 quartering. Mirage flips near 800. Cross Canyon looks half value left to right. Copy, Harper said. Let me see the pattern. She looked through the scope without touching the rifle. The ridge wore sunlight like a hard plate. Nothing moved up there except heat. No flash, no head, no barrel. Just a line of stone with too many places to be wrong. Patrol 3, Jake called, status on the urgent. There was a pause that felt longer than it was. Still bleeding. Pressure helps. He is pale and sleepy. Keep talking to him, Harper said into the net. Name, favorite food, anything. If you lose his voice, tell me first. Ruiz read the kestrel again. DA is 3150. Pressure dropping a hair. Wind is gusty at the far face. Call it 10 full value when it peaks. Harper dialed her elevation. She held off on wind. She watched the mirage again. At 400 the lines leaned. At 800 they flattened and slid. At the ridge they tore sideways and then fell still like a breath held too long. She noted the beat of it. She built it into the math. Jake crouched at her elbow. Medevac is 2 minutes from hold. They need a clear. I can push them early, but they will be exposed on approach. Hold them until the shot, Harper said. As soon as we get effect on target, push them hard. I will move to the casualty. Jake looked from her hands to the rifle and back to her face. You good? I am fine, she said, and meant it. Ruiz found something, then lost it. He went back, slow and patient, and found it again. A seam darker than stone. Not movement. A texture that did not match. He traced the line of it with words that narrowed to a point. Left of the big boulder. There is a pocket that looks wrong. 6 inches lower than the lip. If he is working a bolt gun, his muzzle blast would print where those pebbles are scoured. Harper slid behind a rifle and set her cheek. The world fell into the glass. The reticle floated over the seam Ruiz had called. She did not see a man. She saw a problem that needed the right amount of pressure and the right direction of force, and then a different set of hands to stop a different kind of bleeding. Wind 9, Ruiz said, then waited a breath. Now 12. Now 8. Pattern is 3 long, 1 short. You will get a calm window after the short. Harper's heart rate did not climb. Her hands did not buzz. She lined the stock in the pocket of her shoulder. She took in a small breath. She let it go. She let gravity do the rest. The trigger wall found her finger. She built pressure into it and held. Bird is on station, Jake said. Say the word. Stand by, Harper said. The radio popped with a new voice from the valley. Doc, he is going. His carotids are thready. We cannot keep up. Stay with him, Harper answered. We are here. Ruiz drew in air slow and quiet. Short gust now. Calm building. Hold for 10 left. Half a tenth high. Send when ready. Harper let the wind pattern move through its cycle. She did not chase it. She waited for the stillness that followed the short gust. It came like a pause between two words. "Send it," Ruiz said. Harper pressed through the brake. The Barrett spoke. The truck, the rise, the men around her, all of it folded under the concussion, and then sprang back. The round lifted and went, a faint trace arcing in the glass along the line she had built in her head. "Track," Ruiz said, already calling the drift. "Hold. Hold. Good. Impact in two." Harper stayed in the scope and watched the seam on the ridge where a man might hide and a muzzle might rest and a life might end. She did not blink. The round struck rock. A puff. A jump of small stones. Then sudden movement as a shape lurched from the pocket, tipping and sliding. "Effect on target," Ruiz said. "No return fire." Jake was already up and moving. Radio on his shoulder. "Medevac go." "Go now." Harper safed the rifle and rolled to her knees. She zipped the scope covers fast, tossed the bolt handle down gently, and grabbed her pack by the drag strap. "Ruiz, stay on glass," she said. "Call any movement." She looked at Jake. "You have air and perimeter. I am going to the patient." He met her eyes and nodded once. "No pride. No jokes. We've got you covered." She ran. The heat hit her like a wall, and then fell behind her as the ground opened into the wadi. Her kit thumped against her back in a rhythm she had learned to trust. She heard rotors building over the ridge. She heard Jake's voice pushing clearances and headings. She heard her own breath and counted it without thinking. Behind her, the Barrett lay cooling in the dust. Ahead of her, someone was bleeding out. She did not look back. The smell of blood hit Harper before she reached the first casualty. Metallic, sharp, unmistakable. Dust coated everything in a dull film, clinging to sweat and bandages alike. The wadi was littered with rifle brass, broken gear, and two men who'd been holding on far longer than they should have. The first soldier was conscious, teeth clenched, clutching his shoulder where a bullet had passed clean through. His sleeve was soaked, but his breathing was steady. Manageable. Harper gave him one quick glance, enough to know he could wait. The second was sprawled on his back, skin pale and lips cracked. Bright red blood pooled around his thigh, seeping past the tourniquet. His chest rose in shallow gasps. Every medic knew that look. The clock had almost run out. "Pressure here," Harper barked, dropping beside him. A young private slammed both hands where she pointed, knuckles white, but the blood still welled up, stubborn and bright. Rodriguez skidded in behind her, sliding to his knees. "What do you need?" "Scalpel, clamps, hemostatics. Get the fluids primed." Her voice was sharp, focused, nothing wasted. Jake's voice crackled over the radio in the background. "Bird inbound, 30 seconds. Perimeter clear. No second shooter spotted." Harper tuned out. She pulled on gloves as fast as she'd ever done, slicing above the tourniquet with quick precision. Blood spurted against her hands, warm and slick, but she didn't flinch. "There," she muttered. "Femoral, high. He's losing volume, too fast." She cut deeper, exposing the torn vessel. For anyone else, this would have been reckless, a procedure reserved for operating rooms. But Harper had lived the nightmare of losing someone without the knowledge to stop the bleed. Not again. "Clamp," she snapped. Rodriguez pressed the tool into her hand. She bit down on the pressure, clamping the artery high, then packed the wound with hemostatic gauze. The bleeding slowed, then stopped. "Fluids in now." Rodriguez threaded the 4-line with steady hands. Harper held pressure and kept her eyes on the soldier's face. His breathing was ragged, but his pulse, weak though it was still there. "Stay with me," she said softly, leaning close. "You're not dying here. Not today." Above them, rotor wash swept down as the medevac bird flared into position. Dust whipped into their eyes, stung their throats, but Harper didn't look up. She secured the gauze, tightened the clamp, and signaled for the litter. The first casualty groaned as two men lifted him. "You're good," Harper told him, giving his shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "Bullet missed anything vital. Pain meds and stitches. You'll be flirting with nurses tomorrow." The second soldier was loaded next. Harper climbed aboard with him, her pack already open on her lap, hands still working even as the helicopter lifted off. She glanced through the open door at the ridge where the sniper had been. Dust still hung in the air from her shot. The Barrett lay cooling somewhere behind her. Now, the weapon was her scalpel. The battlefield had demanded both, and she'd given it both. Back at base, chaos turned into order. The bird touched down on the pad, medics rushing the casualties inside. Harper handed off with clip precision, giving vitals, estimated blood loss, what interventions she'd already performed. The surgical team wheeled the urgent casualty away within seconds. Only then did she let herself exhale. She stripped off bloody gloves, her hands trembling now that the adrenaline was wearing off. Her uniform was soaked, streaked with dust and red. Sweat plastered her hair to her forehead. "Doc," a voice said quietly. She turned. Jake stood a few feet away, helmet under his arm, dirt streaked across his face. His tone was different, no swagger, no mockery, just something she hadn't heard from him before. Respect. That shot. And then what you did here. He shook his head slowly. "I've never seen anything like it." Harper's eyes flicked to him, steady and unreadable. "You've never seen it because most people choose one skill set or the other. But sometimes you don't get the luxury of choosing." Jake nodded, swallowing hard. He looked like he wanted to say more, but the words caught. For the first time, Chief Morrison didn't look like a man in control. He looked like someone trying to reconcile the gap between what he thought he knew and what he'd just witnessed. Hours later, after decontamination and a debrief, Harper found herself back in the TOC. Colonel Hayes stood at the same table, the glow of maps still dancing across his features. This time, the corners of his mouth tugged upward in something almost like a smile. "The soldier you treated made it through surgery," he said. "Surgeons said without your field repair, he wouldn't have made it off the bird." Harper let out a slow breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Relief washed over her in a wave, tempered by exhaustion. "That shot was impressive too," Hayes continued. "Disabled the sniper without killing him. He's in custody now. Intel's eager to have a conversation with him." "I was aiming to neutralize," Harper said. "The method doesn't matter. The outcome does." Hayes studied her for a long moment. "You understand the bigger picture better than most. I'm recommending you for assignment with the Joint Special Operations Medical Team. They need people who can bridge both sides of the fight. Interested?" Harper glanced at her blood-stained hands, then back at him. "I became a medic to save lives. Today reminded me that sometimes saving lives requires more than one skill. If I can teach others that, then yes. I'm interested." Hayes nodded once. "Outstanding. Chief Morrison has also requested a meeting with you." Harper wasn't surprised. She'd been expecting it since the moment the Barrett went quiet. "Send him in." Jake entered the room, shoulders squared, but the cocky tilt of his chin was gone. He stopped in front of Harper and, for the first time, snapped to attention and saluted. "Sergeant First Class McKenna," he said formally. "I owe you more than an apology. My behavior was unprofessional, disrespectful. I let my ego and my assumptions about medics, about female soldiers blind me. Today, that almost cost lives." He hesitated, then pressed on. "You saved 2 men with skills I couldn't hope to match. I was wrong about everything. I'm sorry." Harper held his gaze for a long moment. Then she returned the salute and extended her hand. "Apology accepted. Everyone has blind spots, Chief. The real test is whether you learn from them." Jake shook her hand, relief plain on his face. "I want to learn. My team needs to learn. Would you train us? Not just on the rifle, but on how to fight and treat side by side the way you do?" Harper allowed herself the smallest smile. "On one condition. For every hour of marksmanship, your team spends an hour on casualty care. You all become partial medics, just like I've had to become partial infantry." "Deal," Jake said immediately. "When do we start?" 0600 tomorrow, Harper said. "And Chief, bring your humility. You're going to need it." Jake actually laughed, genuine this time. "Fair enough." That night, as Harper stripped down her gear, the Barrett leaned in the corner of her quarters. Its steel frame gleamed faintly in the dim light. She ran a hand along the barrel, remembering the man she couldn't save years ago, and the one she had saved today. The rifle and the scalpel. Both tools. Both necessary. And she was done choosing between them. The next morning, before the desert sun cleared the horizon, Jake's SEAL team was already lined up on the training field. Their usual cocky energy was missing, replaced with something quieter. Curiosity, respect, maybe even nerves. Harper McKenna arrived with a rucksack slung over one shoulder and the Barrett in its hard case. She didn't bark orders. She didn't raise her voice. She simply walked to the center of the range and set down two things, her trauma kit and the rifle. This week, she said, you're going to learn that these aren't opposites. They're part of the same fight. The men looked at each other, uncertain. Harper opened the trauma kit first. Every operator here knows how to clear a room, stack a corner, call wind. But how many of you know how to keep your teammate alive when his femoral's open and you're 30 minutes from evac? How many of you know how to decompress a chest under fire? That knowledge is as deadly to the enemy as any bullet. She pulled out a training mannequin, its torso molded from ballistic gel. With practiced precision, she demonstrated a needle decompression, then a tourniquet high on the thigh. Her movements were deliberate, efficient, the same way she had been behind the Barrett. Medicine and marksmanship used the same skills, she explained. Patience, precision, the ability to stay calm when everything in you wants to panic. You apply pressure in the right place at the right time or people die. Doesn't matter if you're holding a clamp or a rifle. Jake's men listened, really listened. For the first time since she'd met them, their attention wasn't on the rank patch or the jokes. It was on her words. Over the days that followed, the range became something new. Not just a shooting gallery, not just a medical station, but a fusion of both. Harper set up drills where the SEALs had to drag a casualty while returning fire, then shift into trauma care without losing situational awareness. At first, they stumbled. Tourniquets went on wrong, airways were fumbled, bandages slipped. But Harper was patient, relentless, pushing them to practice until muscle memory replaced hesitation. You don't get to choose the order, she told them. You don't get to say, first I'll shoot, then I'll patch. The battlefield decides. You need to flow between both without losing momentum. By midweek, the team had stopped complaining. They were starting to see what she meant. One evening, after a particularly grueling exercise, Jake dropped down beside her while she cleaned the Barrett. You know, he said, I used to think medicine slowed us down. That a medic was someone you protected until the shooting stopped. He shook his head. Now I see the truth. A medic who can fight isn't a burden. They're the force multiplier. Harper smiled faintly. And a fighter who can treat wounds doesn't just win battles. They make sure the victory lasts. The final day of training came with a complex scenario Harper had designed herself. A mass casualty ambush simulation, multiple injuries, multiple hostile targets, chaos in every direction. The SEALs launched into it with intensity. Some secured the perimeter while others dropped to their knees beside casualties. Roles shifted on the fly, riflemen becoming medics, medics becoming riflemen. Under fire, they packed wounds, cleared airways, and stabilized while keeping threats suppressed. At the climax, Jake himself was faced with the exact dilemma Harper had once lived. A downed teammate bleeding out and a long-range shooter pinning them in place. He didn't hesitate. McKenna, take the Barrett, he barked. Mason, switch to medical. Rodriguez, spot for her. Harper settled behind a rifle. The scenario unfolding almost like memory. She calculated, adjusted, fired. The steel target rang. The enemy sniper was down. Her teammates finished the medical intervention. Index, Jake called, raising his hand. Scenario complete. The after-action review wasn't about who had shot better or who had patched faster. It was about how seamlessly the two skills had meshed. Harper watched as Jake led the discussion, emphasizing the same lessons she had drilled into him days earlier. The battlefield doesn't care about your MOS, Jake told his men. It only cares if you can adapt. That's what Doc here taught us. A warrior who can heal, a healer who can fight, that's the future. That's how we keep each other alive. For For the first time, Harper saw not just understanding in his eyes, but conviction. He believed it. That evening, she found a small package outside her quarters. Inside was a custom challenge coin. On one side, the SEAL trident. On the other, a combat medic badge superimposed over a rifle scope. Below it, a single word: healer. Jake was waiting outside when she emerged, hands in his pockets. "We had it made," he said. "Figured if we're going to learn from you, we should honor what makes you different." Harper turned the coin in her hand, the metal cool against her skin. She looked at Jake. "What makes me different isn't the mix of skills. It's knowing when to use which one. You and your team understand that now. Use it wisely." Jake nodded. "We will. And Harper, thank you for opening our eyes. We thought we were hammers. You showed us sometimes the job needs a scalpel. And sometimes, yeah, it still needs a Barrett." The next morning, Harper stood alone at the range one last time. The Barrett rested on its bipod, silent. She traced her hand along the barrel, remembering Marcus, remembering the soldier she had saved, remembering all the times she'd had to choose. Colonel Hayes found her there. "Second thoughts?" "No, sir," she said. "Just remembering why I do this. Every medic I train will understand our weapons aren't just rifles or medical kits. They're choices. Knowing which tool to use and when." Hayes nodded. "Well said." Harper gave the Barrett one last look. This rifle spoke when silence meant death. In the right hands, with the right purpose, even a weapon of war can be an instrument of peace. She turned away, walking back toward her new assignment, leaving the range behind. Behind her, Jake's voice carried across the sand as he trained the next group of operators. Somewhere in that crowd, a medic would learn to shoot. Somewhere else, a rifleman would learn to stop bleeding. The cycle would continue, and the lesson Harper McKenna had carved into dust and blood would live on. That true strength isn't in the weapon you carry or the badge on your chest. It's in the wisdom to know when to use the rifle, when to use the scalpel, and when to use both.